So let's continue. And let's go to the transitional environments. So what are transitional environments? Those are the environments in between the continent and the sea. So in between maybe a meandering river system, because we are now towards the sea, and a beach. Most important, you have these two features, deltas and estuaries. What are deltas? Well, deltas are, at the mouth you have rivers, and when they reach the sea, so here is your river flowing, and here is the sea. So here would be your coast. The river reached the sea and starts depositing so it will deposit what it transports. It will divide itself into channels, and the channel will start depositing maybe silt they carry. So it's a deposition on a marine, what used to be a marine environment. So the delta will advance on the bottom of the sea. And if it's advanced, this is called progradation. Now, what's interesting is that, I should go like this, that the delta will have its own plane, like an alluvial plane, but this is called the delta plane. And there will be a lower delta plane and an upper delta plane. Now, the upper delta plane is absolutely similar to a meandering river system. So it becomes a kind of very difficult to distinguish it. But what happens? The delta plane here will be rich in swamps, for example, because, so if this keeps prograding, this will become more and more terrestrial or transitional. It goes on. So you will have more swamps between the channels of the delta. And guess what could happen in these swamps? You could actually have peat, which then in the future becomes coal. So all the system through progradation shifts. So what happens is that maybe a meandering river plane would go on top of the upper delta plane, which is absolutely similar to this one. The only thing is that maybe every once in a while in the upper delta plane you have some influence from the sea. And what is that influence? The sea has tides. So having tides, sometimes the, like the river, and which is what the hunter does, the river will feel the tide, so there would be some sedimentary structure telling you about this. And the most typical sedimentary structure related to tide are called herringbones. So they're like small cross laminae, they go one way and the other, at a very fine scale. Because the current goes like this and that. In the meandering river plane, you don't find this. But then the system migrates, so the upper delta plane would go on top of the lower delta plane, which will go on top of the delta front. And the delta front, if we look at it in depth, because it's prograding, so here is our river coming in, and then the progradation will be like this. Now, isn't this fun? I mean, this looks like our, if I draw it like this, it looks exactly like our point bar. But the point bar I told you was lateral aggradation. This one is progradation because the whole edifice, it's building in the same sense of the current. And then you say, oh gosh, how are we going to identify if it's a delta or if it's a meandering river? Well, one of the things is, first of all, this bottom is not a channel. Okay? And I told you that the delta is prograding on top of a marine bottom, so a marine environment. So what are we going to expect down here? We are going to expect the fines. And if you are lucky, in this fine, you might find some shells. And then you know that this is not a meandering river system, but it's more likely to be a delta. Then there are other depositional systems which might look like this, but I'm going to talk about those later. So if it's prograding, we are expecting to find on the delta front, which will have its sand and silt, we are going to have a little bit of, I always have to look at my book to try to draw it accurately. So this is correct. So we have the sand, and the sand is on top of the fine called mud rocks with a few fossils. Fantastic. And then, this is a river. So we might actually find evidence of a channel with a little bit of its coarse load and sand. And then maybe we have what? The usual stuff you find in a river channel. A fining upward sequence, because this part, so the lower and upper delta plane, migrate on top of that. So in the end, you have other fines, but they will be different from this. because what do we expect here? This is continental, so we expect the trees. So these finds we expect, these mud rocks we expect a little bit of marine shells. And on top of this accession, we expect to find maybe trees or even coal. Because at the end of the progradation, what we find is the finds and a terrestrial environment. Now, here you might have this wonderful question. What is the end of the progradation? What makes this stop?